There is a book on trauma and faith that I've found myself reading and rereading over the last couple years. It's called Bearing the Unbearable by Deborah Van Hunsinger. And there's a part in this book where she writes that the Bible is largely a story of hope emerging from hopelessness, of new beginnings arising from bitter endings. I think very often that we, or at the very least I, try to reverse the order or erase half of that equation. When pain hasn't yet emerged into something new, it seems like a better answer. We want to give something reason or have it make sense. There is no resurrection without death, but that feels like a very poor excuse for trauma and grief and loss. But does a wound have to have a reason in order to be healed? It seems absurd to say that healing is the point of an injury. Easter morning comes because of Good Friday, not the other way around. We need Easter mornings in our lives because we stand in the midst of our own times of death and fear and fully embodied suffering. I think Good Friday and the death of Jesus shows us the hollowness of platitudes and the easy answers to pain. There is no resurrection in hearing God won't give you more than you can handle. There's no transformation in saying that all of this will make sense someday. Attempting to erase, forget, or deny what has happened isn't healing. It is a trauma response to something that you have not yet processed or worked through. And again, as Hunsinger says in her book, unhealed trauma often leads to further violence, either against oneself or against others, and thus to more trauma. Resurrective healing is transformative, not erasive. It doesn't deny what happened, but recognizes that what happened mattered. The tomb itself stands as a reminder for enduring grief of a trauma that I doubt could be forgotten by Mary or the disciples, even after the resurrection and after they have seen Jesus with their own eyes. That the idea that you were not weak for being broken, that it is natural, it is impermanent in its current state, but it will always exist in some form. The resurrection of Christ ends the cycle of violence by transforming it, not ignoring it. I think the death of Christ shows us many things. I think it shows the lie of redemptive violence. I think it shows the emptiness and the re-traumatizing in the ways we try to ignore our own grief. But what always strikes me the most, I think, is it shows us that the way through death is resurrection and transformation. And this does not happen until the temple curtain has been torn down, until we have anointed our dead, until we have sat and lived with our grief and gone to bed with it at night. It happens only after we have visited the tomb in the morning to honor the loss that we've endured. I got my first COVID vaccination yesterday, and before I went in, I sat in my car and I just cried. And when I received that shot, those tears were still shed. It didn't erase the loss I felt when I withdrew from seminary a year ago. It didn't undo the loneliness and the grief that we've experienced. But it began the process of tearing down the curtain that has divided me from God, from you and God in you. We need this moment to pause and sit in our grief. We need this moment to pause and recognize the trauma suffered by Jesus, by the disciples, by God, by ourselves. Good Friday tells me that it is okay to not have an answer as to why yet. So Good Friday tells me that I will go to bed with my grief tonight, and that the death of Jesus tells me that what we have experienced is real and important and physically present. The cross tells me that all of this will be transformed. It tells me that this is the time to be angry. This is also the time to be sad. Good Friday reminds me that there's no such thing as bad emotions, but instead emotions that must be felt.